Something weird happened when Shadow of the Erdtree was released. The discourse around difficulty in the Souls-like genre shifted. Where Get Good used to be the toxic answer to any complaints around the hard challenges offered by From Software, it seems that there's now an inverted take. Get Strong. Which can be summarized as, if you're not using all the tools at your disposal, it's your fault if you find the game too hard. An attack that is often directed at a presumed ego-driven, self-imposed set of rules. One that frames players refusing to use systems like summons, buffs, or magic builds as responsible for feeling overwhelmed by the game's difficulty. Or, in other words, you are not playing the game like you are supposed to. That's quite the claim. Not a new one, though. Echoes of the invalidation tactics we got used to from the Get Good crowd washed back upon the shores of Reddit and Twitter like a wave of plastic trash coming back to haunt us after we dumped it into the sea. Each time we hear people claim that there is a proper way to play, what we are hearing is an amateur translation of the work, transforming the game as an artistic object into a definitive and clear philosophy. People claim that they know what the intended experience is, as if through the work they could peek inside the mind of the creators. It's an interesting process to go through, but it is flawed and, if not backed up by any dev interviews, just an educated guess. This video aims at understanding this notion, the intended experience, and how we relate to it, as players, but also as people who discuss games. Or we could say that I'm trying to answer the question, is the game trying to tell us that some playstyles aren't valid anymore? We will look at other titles at first, but in the end this is about Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree, a game that serves as a fantastic case study for such an inquiry. By understanding the new heights of its difficulty, and by dissecting the online discourse that came out of it, maybe we'll manage to find a bit of empathy for all of those who just want to enjoy playing their game in the way they wanted. In the lovely but poorly named Immortals Fenyx Rising, you have a set of abilities that are used to solve puzzles in a similar fashion to Breath of the Wild. Through some upgrades you can get a more powerful version of them, which, unlike Breath of the Wild, completely changes how you can engage with the puzzles. Once immovable rocks can now be thrown around, you find new ways to move, and at some point you can even create a rocky clone of yourself. It unlocks possibilities just like a Metroidvania would. The problem I encountered with this was that it could trivialize puzzles based around the lesser version of the ability, and I never really knew if I was cheating my way through these puzzles by missing the solution that was using the first set of abilities, but not their upgrades. I feared that I wasn't engaging the game in the way it wanted me to play, that I was missing out on a challenge I could enjoy. At that moment, I was struggling with the idea of the intended experience. This notion where I presume of a way the game was designed. I'm thinking that I know what the developer wanted me to do, the rules they wanted me to play by. I wanted to accept the challenge they laid out for me. But when the game was ambiguous about what powers were needed versus what powers would make the puzzle easier, I actually had to retro-engineer the problem, trying to make sure I wasn't cutting myself out of the experience. I wanted to enter a dialogue with the level designer, because I enjoy being challenged. It's not out of ego or orthodoxy, there's no fear of being shamed by the Get Good community of Immortals Fenyx Rising. It's just the way I've found to experience the most fun. Usually, the easier version doesn't provide the same enjoyment for me. In that case, my idea of the intended experience is engaging the puzzle in its harder form. And I inferred it to be the case because it's a binary choice. Either you have the upgrade or you don't. Making it possible for someone to solve the puzzle without them is absolutely intended. It doesn't invalidate those who engage it differently, or that these other ways to solve the puzzle aren't part of the intended experience, but it still makes it sure to me that it has been thought through with those specific abilities in mind. If we go back to FromSoft games, I personally don't enjoy summons precisely because I feel that the game isn't built around them when it comes to optimizing my fun. My fun. Because I find that the divided attention of the AI breaks the immersion and robs me of the tension of a duel to the death. Same reason I don't enjoy using range attacks or magic. I don't feel in the battle. I feel out of it. I find the game loses some of its most compelling qualities, those that got me to fall in love with it in the first place. I've played every Souls-like this way, and there's no other gameplay that gets my blood pumping as much in any other genre. Just like I preferred the difficult version of Immortals Phoenix Rising's puzzles. I preferred being in the action while playing my Souls games. I think that's the simplest way I have to understand the intended experience and how it can be looked at in a non-toxic way. We're always gonna guess what it includes because we're not in an actual dialogue with the designer, but in a metaphorical one. I don't want to miss out on the challenge they created, and I don't see those who don't approach the game in the same way as me, as posers, or people who don't respect the work that has been put into it. It's just a personal preference. But that's the simplest version of the idea. The question now becomes, how does it work for games like Elden Ring? Difficulty in its larger sense is a way more complex notion, because when combat, skills, and progression systems are included, what seemed binary might start looking like a full-blown spectrum of player experiences and capabilities. The idea of an intended experience gets blurrier and blurrier with each intervening system because there are so many possibilities for power creep that it's harder to find where each player will fall. For example, when is it time to beat Margit? What level? How much should you have upgraded your weapon? How many flasks do you have? Have you played the game or similar ones enough to learn how to deal with his moveset? All of that before even mentioning the build. This was already present in other FromSoft games, but in the case of Elden Ring, the open nature of the adventure really makes it the blurriest version of that we've ever seen. It's the first game in the Souls-like genre where I would sometimes ask myself if I was supposed to be there at that point. But someone could argue that the question of difficulty can always be boiled down to this simple truth. It's either possible or it isn't. In RPG based in numbers, some fights are literally impossible at some points. With a Souls-like genre, where the combat is based in animation and you're supposed to be able to dodge every hit, well, technically everything is possible at any point. The internet is filled with room level 1 runs and no-hit playthroughs. And on the other side, you've got overpowered builds where you don't have to move a finger while your Mimic Tear solos Malenia. I think these two extremes can be used as a representation of the two sides of what can become a toxic discourse around difficulty. We've been accustomed to the get good catchphrase for more than a decade now, but with Elden Ring and even more so with Shadow of the Earth 3, there's this new sentiment that I'll coin as get strong. If you die too much, go farms, use summons, go find some more Scooby-Doo tree fragments. Both crowds, the get good and the get strong, claim that they know the true way to play, and that the complaints come from a place of misunderstanding the game. You should suck it up, learn to dodge, and if you use something else than the bare bones mechanics, you are cheating. Or you should stop being such an egomaniac and use summons or a meta build or perma-stagger an enemy by dual-wielding colossal swords. All of this, it feels to me like it's all about undermining other people's experience. It's not too hard, you're playing it wrong. Rarely do I hear anybody caring about the player's fun. That's quite a blind spot. My problem with these takes is that they often fail to investigate in depth the claims of a difficulty that has gone too far, and in what way does this impact the experience of the player. I worked in the industry, specifically in user research. You know, the people that put games in the hands of other players to collect their impressions. And I can tell you that if all I did was note down that the players find it too difficult, I'd be fired. Because I'd be missing the whole point. Like a cop investigating a murder declaring it solved by saying, I found out that the guy is dead. So, it's time to get to the heart of it. Go beyond the surface. Because the truth is that by expanding the intended experience due to the very nature of Elden Ring, FromSoft struggled with the question of balance and things changed. How do you make a game that is more than a breeze for those who get strong, while maintaining an experience that is manageable for those who still wish to engage in a minimalist playstyle? Because, in my opinion, these things used to cohabit pretty well. We've got two foundations to look at this issue. Firstly, we have to recognize that what is part of the intended experience can be hard to grasp, but we must also accept that seeking a certain challenge is not necessarily driven by ego. Secondly, Elden Ring is the most complex game FromSoft made in terms of the amount of mechanics that interact with the difficulty. In that sense, there's probably a larger amount of diverse experiences in terms of power level than ever before. going from a lower floor to a higher ceiling. It means that many people won't play the same game even if they booted the same executable. And this leads me to believe that the claims of the DLC being too hard can absolutely be justified. It depends on which game you played. My argument is that combat changed in Elden Ring because of the new systems. We often hear that Dark Souls always had a difficulty slider. It was just built into the game and not in the menu. The harder version was the melee build without access to magic or range weapons, which meant the player was always in danger while fighting. And it felt like every encounter was balanced around making it a viable way to play. Then you could be safer or more deadly with magic or range weapons, you could summon, you could kindle bonfires, you could pick up the meta weapon and armors, you could farm, etc. You could make it easier if you wanted to. I think the problem with Elden Ring is that by adding a lot of systems that make the game easier, it started to need a higher difficulty to keep up with the added powers entrusted to the players, which became very apparent in its late game and now is at the core of the DLC's design. Bosses started to become deadlier, even in relative terms. Being 1 or 2 shots is now the norm. Maybe you can survive 3 hits if you fully dedicate yourself to a tanky build, but even then it sometimes isn't enough. Punish windows became narrower and the rhythm of exchange started to shift from what felt like a dialogue to finding the moment the boss has to breathe during his monologue. Moves became flashier and flashier to the extent where the camera struggles to keep up and the effect around the attack obscures your vision and make it difficult to even just see what is going on. Combos now have conditional extensions based on positioning or input reading that can be hard to learn depending on the clarity of the animation. And there are attacks that feel simply undodgeable. And this is where I get my personal story in there. I'm someone who's played every Souls game with a minimalist playstyle. The whole melee build, no magic, no buff. I don't look at guides, I just pick the first weapon I enjoy using and go through the game. I've hit roadblocks less and less as I familiarize myself with the genre, but with enough time and dedication, I knew the games were designed to let me prevail in my preferred style. Until I fought Malenia, and more specifically, Waterfowl Dance that's accompanied with her lifesteal mechanic. And that was just entirely different, because even though many Elden Ring bosses started to suffer from what I described earlier, this one just crushed the frontier of what felt possible. I couldn't, for the love of Miquella, dodge Waterfowl Dance. It often one-shot me even though I was wearing heavy armor and had reasonable vigor, and if it didn't kill me, she would regen most of the damage I had managed to do because, not using guides or anything, my build was far from optimized, so I wasn't close to being lethal enough. No matter how good I got at that fight, Waterfowl was always the end. It's the first time in all these games that I've ever felt like I was playing the game wrong. It was the end of the hard but fair mantra. The bullshit meter already had gone in the red a couple of times with some of the bosses, but this blew the whole thing up. I had to respec, choose a different weapon, I hid behind a shield with max defense to survive Waterfowl Dance. I had to change my approach to the game to finally prevail. And I know the attack is technically dodgeable, some no-hit runs exist, but might I say it's too hard? How long should it take for a decent player to learn how to dodge an attack? Am I the problem if after 4 hours I couldn't do it? Are you supposed to look up a video on how to dodge it? Is that part of the intended experience? Most importantly, what did the game gain by leaving people like me behind? If getting good was my fun, how is making it a less viable option good for the game? Difficulty can be adjusted in many ways. You can account for the power creep, the get strong playstyle in other ways than with almost undodgeable attacks. And it seems it's now part of the arsenal. They chose it for Malenia, and then they continued in Shadow of the Erdtree. I want to preface this by saying that, as a whole, Shadow of the Erdtree is fantastic, and the challenges offered are some of the best we've had. It's almost never the whole fight, it's usually a couple of moves or design choices that affect the experience and tarnish the idea that every hit taken is your fault. This being said, even Miyazaki himself told us that they push the envelope in terms of what they think can be withstood by the players. And it shows. Nowhere is it clearer than with the final boss, Royal Consort Radahn. Probably the most difficult boss I've ever encountered in the genre, for many reasons. Its first phase is viable. The counter windows can sometimes be narrow, some attacks leave no openings, so it continues in the monologue style of fight. He is very deadly. I was in the heaviest armor in the game, at least the one I could find, with 60 vigor and defense talismans, and I would still die in 2 or maybe 3 hits. He has an attack that can instantly punish you for healing at almost any distance, which he does sometimes, so technically the right way to heal is to wait for a long enough opening that allows you to fit in the healing animation instead of attacking him. And there's this double cross attack that in my many hours of fighting him, I've not once managed to dodge. It always roll caught me. Other attacks suffers from the unclear tutorialization of what can be jumped, which is usually so poorly telegraphed that I don't see how players are supposed to reliably use it outside of just trial and error. And this is part of the larger issue where I don't think Shadow of the Earth 3 is good at letting you learn the fights. There's so much stuff on screen, so much feints with similar animations that have opposite reaction requirements and attacks that can kill you almost instantly. You'll see them once in a while in the second phase of the fight, which gives you very little opportunity to learn how to dodge it because you don't see it often enough because it kills you. So you end up mastering the first part of the fight, which takes a lot of time because of the larger health pool, and then you die to the really challenging part, which means you basically get one try every 5 minutes to learn that one attack that always gets you. In the second phase of the final boss, the constant pillars of light can hide the characters on screen, and some attacks come at such a frenzied rhythm that they don't seem to belong to the same game as the rest. It felt to me like they stretched the new design philosophy to its extreme, that they never intended the fight to be mastered by most players. Maybe they expected the tension to come from us pushing through and healing while we tanked what couldn't be evaded, building to that moment where you finally get that final hit with almost no healing left. Well, to me, it felt that if you weren't strong, mechanically so, the fight wasn't possible for even a seasoned player. I don't know how many hours it took me, but I finally killed Radahn and Miquella. I didn't even feel good about it. It felt like in that one run, I was just lucky enough for the real challenging moves to have lined up in such a way that I could heal through the fight. I didn't master it, and I'm not sure that I could without another 5 or more hours. And maybe I'm the problem here, I don't know. There's no doubt that these walls I've hit are manageable. Nothing here is literally impossible. But possible to what extent? And difficult at what cost? I do think this is getting too hard. But my experience alone isn't enough to know. Which brings us back to what this video is about. Actually engaging in the discourse. I feel that these complaints, these arguments pushing back on the game's difficulty are worthy of being investigated. Brushing them off with a get strong take on the question of the intended experience seems to me like a simplistic answer. I think this is failing to take into account a decade of hard but fair design philosophy where difficulty was never the goal, but rather a sense of accomplishment. I'm one of those who felt like Dark Souls expanded that sense of accomplishment through its mechanics, letting anyone with enough dedication conquer Lordaeron with the help they needed. With this new level of difficulty, I'm feeling that they are in fact narrowing it down by leaving those behind who found their enjoyment of the game by taking it on its simplest form. And even by saying this, I don't want to condemn Shadow of the Earth 3 as a whole. This DLC is absolutely fantastic in its world and level design. Some of the new bosses are now up there as my favorites among the whole catalog. I'm just saying that people invoking with certainty a precise intended experience to invalidate the questioning of some of the design choices should acknowledge that it isn't as simple as that. That's all. Now, let's debate and express ourselves with all the love we can muster and enter an age of compassion. Hope you enjoyed.